There is a village in the continental United States where, 6 days a week, the mail still arrives exactly the way it did over 100 years ago, carried on the backs of mules down 8 miles of canyon trail because there has never been a road. And the reason this tribe still lives at the bottom of that canyon, instead of the land their ancestors actually farmed and hunted for 1,000 years, comes down to a fight that took almost a century to win. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly how that fight ended. Let's take a closer look. This is Supai, the capital and only village of the Havasupai Indian Reservation, sitting at the bottom of Havasu Canyon, a side canyon of the Grand Canyon itself. There is no road here. Getting in means an 8-mile hike, a mule ride, or a helicopter, weather and lottery permitting. Stay with me until the end, because the story of how this tribe ended up confined to this exact canyon and how they eventually got most of their land back is one of the most significant land rights victories in modern American history, and almost nobody who visits for the waterfalls ever hears it. Falls. The Havasupai, whose name means people of the blue-green water, have lived in and around this canyon for at least 800 years, quite possibly longer. Traditionally, the tribe followed a seasonal rhythm perfectly adapted to this landscape, farming the fertile canyon floor through the warmer months, then moving up to hunt and gather on the plateau above during winter, using the entire vertical range of the canyon and rim country as one connected homeland. That balance was shattered in 1882, when the federal government confined the Havasupai to a reservation of just 518 acres at the very bottom of the canyon, a tiny fraction of the territory the tribe had used for centuries, cutting them off from the plateau hunting grounds that had always complemented their canyon farming. The situation grew even more restrictive in 1919 when Congress established the Grand Canyon as a national park. Much of the Havasupai's traditional plateau land fell under National Park Service control, further limiting the tribe's access to territory they had used for generations. Even as tourists began arriving in growing numbers to see the very canyon the Havasupai called home. What followed was nearly a century of the tribe fighting through every available legal and political channel simply to get a meaningful share of that ancestral land back. It's a fight that culminated in one of the most significant land restorations in 20th century American history. But to understand why it mattered so much, you first need to understand exactly what daily life in this 8-mile deep canyon actually looks like. Supai holds a genuinely rare distinction. It is the only place in the United States where you cannot drive to your own home under any circumstances, no matter how much money or determination you have. The village sits 8 miles from the nearest road, at Hualapai Hilltop, connected only by a steep, winding trail that descends roughly 2,000 feet into the canyon. There are exactly 3 ways to make that journey. On foot, which typically takes several hours each way, by mule or horse, following the same trail, or by helicopter, when weather permits and seats are available, with tribal members boarding first. before any tourists. There is no fourth option, no emergency shortcut, no road that could be built, even if anyone wanted one, given the terrain. This total absence of road access shapes literally everything about life here. How groceries arrive, how construction materials get moved, how medical emergencies are handled, and most famously, how the mail gets delivered. It's every single item that isn't grown, hunted, or made within the canyon itself has to make that same 8-mile journey, one way or another. It's the kind of isolation that would make almost any modern town impossible to sustain. And yet, Supai isn't simply surviving. It's home to hundreds of people, a school, a cafe, a post office, and one of the most visited natural attractions in the entire country. Understanding how that economy actually works and what it costs to live here is where we're headed next. Tourism is, by a wide margin, the backbone of Supai's modern economy. More than 20,000 visitors make the journey into this canyon every year, drawn by the famous turquoise waterfalls just beyond the village. But access isn't simply a matter of showing up. Every visitor needs a permit, allocated through an annual lottery typically held each February, and demand consistently far outstrips the limited number of spots available. Those permit fees fund far more than just trail access. They pay for trail maintenance, flood repair after the canyon's frequent flash floods, and remarkably, the removal of trash and waste from an 8-mile deep canyon with no road. Work that has to be done largely by helicopter at genuinely staggering cost compared to almost anywhere else in the country. The cost of actually staying in Supai reflects that same isolation. A 3-night stay at the tribally run Havasupai Lodge runs well over $2,000 per room, and hiring a pack mule to haul gear the 8 miles down into the canyon costs around $400 round trip. Every dollar of that cost traces directly back to the same fact that defines everything else here. Nothing reaches this canyon without a genuinely difficult, expensive journey. For the Havasupai themselves, tourism revenue has become the primary economic engine sustaining the tribe, alongside continued subsistence farming and, in recent decades, formal tribal enterprise built specifically around managing visitor access. It's an economy built almost entirely around the very isolation that once made this canyon feel like a place the rest of the country could simply forget about. A contrast that becomes even sharper once you understand exactly how close the tribe came to losing this land altogether. Supai today is a genuine, functioning village. Homes, a school, a church, a general store, a cafe, and a post office, all tucked into a canyon floor surrounded by towering red rock walls. With no cars anywhere in the village, movement here happens on foot or, for cargo, by mule, giving daily life a rhythm that feels genuinely disconnected from anywhere else in modern America. The Havasupai Tribe itself remains remarkably small, among the smallest federally recognized tribal nations in the country, with several hundred enrolled members, only a portion of whom live in Supai village year-round. For those who do, daily life blends traditional practices, including some continued farming on the canyon's fertile floodplains, with the very modern demands of running a tourism operation that brings tens of thousands of outside visitors through their home every year. The Havasupai Museum of Culture in the village preserves and shares tribal history and tradition, and community events like the annual Peach Festival in August and the Grandmother Canyon Gathering in the fall keep cultural practices active and visible, even as the village manages an enormous seasonal influx of hikers passing through toward the waterfalls beyond town. That balance, an isolated, tight-knit community managing a level of tourist traffic that would strain far larger, far more accessible towns, is only sustainable because of decisions the tribe fought hard to win control over. And that fight over land and self-determination is really the central story of modern Supai, one that started long before any tourist ever heard of Havasu Falls. Supai holds one distinction found nowhere else in the entire United States Postal Service system. It is the last place in America where mail is delivered by mule train. 6 days a week, mule trains, operated by a contracted mail carrier, haul roughly 41,000 pounds of mail and supplies down that same 8-mile trail. Everything from letters and packages to groceries, medicine, and household appliances that residents have ordered, since there's simply no other practical way for those goods to reach the canyon floor. This isn't a tourist novelty maintained for charm. It's genuine, essential infrastructure. The Postal Service classification exists specifically because no other delivery method works here, and it has functioned this way for generations. A living piece of American postal history that has disappeared everywhere else in the country. Beyond the mail contract itself, mule packing has become its own small but significant economic sector, with tribal and contracted mule operators hauling tourist gear down into the canyon for visitors unwilling or unable to carry their own packs on the 8-mile hike, supplementing the tourism economy with jobs directly tied to the same infrastructure that makes basic life here possible at all. It's a genuinely unusual economic ecosystem, one where the same mule trains carrying a hiker's overnight bag are, on any given day, also carrying someone's prescription medication or a replacement part for the village generator. Infrastructure and tourism attraction, functioning as the exact same system. And understanding why this tribe still lives down here, so far from the plateau land their ancestors also once called home, requires finally telling the fuller story of exactly what happened to that land. Reaching Supai requires real commitment before you've even left home. Visitors first need a permit, secured through an annual lottery process that opens once a year and is consistently oversubscribed, given the limited number of spots available relative to demand. Permit in hand, the journey to the trailhead itself, Hualapai Hilltop, means driving to the end of Indian Route 18 off historic Route 66 in one of the more remote corners of northern Arizona. From there, the actual descent into the canyon covers 8 miles and drops roughly 2,000 feet in elevation, on foot, by mule, or, for those who can secure one of the limited seats, by helicopter, which operates on a first-come, first-served basis, with tribal members always boarding first, ahead of any tourists. There is no shortcut available at any price. No emergency road access exists for this canyon, meaning even serious medical situations depend on the same helicopter service that ferries tourists. Weather permitting, it's a level of committed difficulty that few other destinations in the United States require simply to arrive. That difficulty hasn't discouraged visitors. If anything, it's become part of Supai's identity, a genuine physical and logistical commitment that separates casual sightseeing from an actual pilgrimage into one of the most isolated, inhabited places in the country. And it's precisely this isolation that made the tribe's decades-long fight for their surrounding land so difficult to win and so significant when they finally did. A handful of details about Supai tend to surprise people more than anything else about the village. The distinctive turquoise blue color of Havasu Falls and the surrounding pools comes from extraordinarily high concentrations of dissolved calcium carbonate in the water, which scatters light in a way that produces that unmistakable blue-green hue, the exact mineral process that also builds the terrace travertine formations the waterfalls cascade over. Flash floods are a genuine recurring danger in this canyon, capable of transforming from clear skies to dangerous rushing water within minutes, given storms occurring anywhere upstream. Major floods in 2008, 2010, and 2018 all forced emergency evacuations of tourists and, at times, residents via helicopter and off-road vehicles. A stark reminder that the same water that creates the canyon's famous beauty can also become genuinely life-threatening with little warning. Every piece of mail sent from Supai carries a unique mule train mail postmark, a small detail that has become a minor tradition among hikers, who often mail postcards or even their own heavy backpacks out of the canyon, rather than carry them back up the 8-mile trail themselves. And despite receiving tens of thousands of visitors annually, Supai remains, by federal recognition, among the smallest tribal nations in the entire United States. A striking contrast between how famous the waterfalls have become globally and how small and tightly knit the community actually managing all of that attention still is. Life in Supai today comes with genuine, unavoidable challenges tied directly to its isolation. Flash flood risk remains a constant seasonal concern, capable of destroying trails, damaging the village itself, and cutting off access entirely with little warning, as it has multiple times in recent decades. Managing tens of thousands of annual visitors through a village this small creates real strain on infrastructure never designed for tourism at this scale. Waste removal, trail maintenance, and emergency services all have to function despite the total absence of road access, at costs far higher than almost any comparably sized town anywhere else in the country would face. The tribe also continues to navigate a complicated relationship with the National Park Service and federal government. Decades after the 1975 land restoration, ongoing questions about resource management, tourism regulation, and the balance between economic necessity and protecting a canyon that remains, at its core, sacred ancestral land rather than simply a tourist destination. And there's a deeper, generational challenge too. Sustaining a tribal community this small, this isolated, and this economically dependent on a single industry, while still preserving the traditions, language, and land-based way of life that predates the national park, the tourists, and even the reservation boundaries themselves by many centuries. Ask members of the Havasupai Tribe why they remain in a canyon this isolated, this difficult to access, and so thoroughly reshaped by a century of federal land policy. And the answer traces back to something considerably deeper than convenience. This canyon is not simply where the tribe currently lives. It is where the Havasupai have lived, farmed, and shaped their entire identity for at least 800 years, long before any national park, any tourist, or any federal boundary existed here at all. The tribe's fight to reclaim their plateau land wasn't simply about acreage. It was about restoring a way of life that had been deliberately fractured. The seasonal movement between canyon farming and plateau hunting that had defined Havasupai culture for centuries, severed first by the 1882 confinement, then further restricted by the 1919 creation of Grand Canyon National Park itself. That fight is really the central, defining story of modern Supai, more significant in the tribe's own telling than the waterfalls that draw the tourists, or even the mule mail that fascinates outside visitors. It's the story of a community that refused to simply accept confinement to 518 acres as a permanent condition and fought generation after generation until the country finally gave a meaningful share of that land back. It's time to finally tell you exactly how that fight ended. After nearly a century of advocacy, legal challenges, and sustained political pressure, Congress passed the Grand Canyon National Park Enlargement Act on January 3, 1975. Public Law 93-620. Among its provisions was a restoration of roughly 185,000 acres of ancestral plateau land to the Havasupai Reservation, expanding the tribe's territory from the original 518 acres at the canyon floor to nearly the full range their ancestors had used for centuries. It remains, to this day, one of the largest single restorations of land to a Native American tribe in the entire 20th century. A direct, hard-won reversal of exactly the kind of confinement policy that had shaped the reservation system across the United States for over 100 years. The act didn't just return acreage, it restored, in a formal legal sense, the tribe's connection to the plateau hunting and foraging grounds that had always complemented their canyon farming, integrating tribal input into how the adjacent national park itself would be managed going forward. This is the actual story behind Supai that most of the 20,000 annual visitors hiking in for the waterfalls never learn. That the very land they're walking through was, within living memory, at the center of one of the most significant Native American land rights victories in modern American history. The mule mail, the turquoise falls, the tight-knit village at the bottom of the canyon, all of it exists today specifically because the Havasupai refused, across nearly a century, to accept that confinement to 518 acres was permanent. Every mule that carries mail down that 8-mile trail today is, in a very real sense, walking through the direct result of that victory. A canyon and its surrounding plateau restored to the people who had called it home for 800 years before any of it was ever taken away. Behind every fact this video has covered, the mule mail, the waterfalls, the 1975 land restoration, there's a name that comes up again and again in the actual history of this canyon: Rex Tillousi. For more than 30 years, on and off, he served as chairman and vice chairman of the Havasupai Tribe, and for most of his life, he was the person who showed up again and again whenever something threatened to take this canyon away from his people a second time. In the 1980s and 90s, and for decades after that, mining companies pushed to open uranium operations just outside the reservation boundary, near a sandstone formation called Red Butte, a site the Havasupai consider sacred, believed to connect the sky to the earth and the earth to the water that feeds this entire canyon. Tillousi spent years fighting that mine, testifying in front of courts, legislatures, and international hearings, warning that any contamination reaching the aquifer wouldn't just be an environmental statistic. It would poison the exact spring-fed creek that turns Havasu Falls that impossible turquoise blue, the same water Supai has depended on for drinking, farming, and daily life for centuries. He didn't win every fight. Courts sided with the mining company more than once, but he kept showing up anyway, singing at Red Butte gatherings, bringing his own grandchildren along, teaching them the same songs and the same warnings his own elders had taught him. Rex Tillousi died in 2021 at 73 and was buried at the Grand Canyon, where he'd spent part of his life working as a cultural interpreter for the very park service that had once confined his tribe to 518 acres. His family held his wake in Supai village, in the same canyon he'd spent his whole life defending. It's easy, watching drone footage of turquoise waterfalls, to forget that a place like this doesn't just survive because it's beautiful. It survives because someone, generation after generation, refuses to stop showing up for it. Rex Tillousi was one of those people. He almost certainly wasn't the last. There's something worth sitting with in the fact that one of America's most photographed natural wonders sits at the center of a land rights story most visitors never think to ask about. Turquoise waterfalls that draw tens of thousands of people a year in a canyon that was nearly permanently taken from the very people who had lived there for centuries. Supai today is both of those things at once, a genuine tourist destination and the hard-won home of a tribe that fought for nearly 100 years simply to keep it. Maybe that's worth remembering the next time a photograph of Havasu Falls shows up on a screen somewhere, that behind the color of that water is a fight that very nearly ended differently. If you find meaning in these forgotten coordinates, consider subscribing to the map. Together, we'll keep rescuing these places from the silence of history.